centipede.
I've always been attracted to the weird, the strange, the oddities, the macabre. I run a paranormal blog. I've been to every supposed haunted location in my tri-state area. I've poured hours of my life into researching the unexplainable. Hell, I practically live on the paranormal subreddit. Quite recently, someone had reached out to me. They asked me if I was interested in going on an expedition. Dear Mr. Palyor, you were invited to a limited number of seats to join us on an expedition for exponential findings. A surge of rather concrete evidence has recently appeared down in the heart of the Florida Everglades. We're compiling a crack team of paranormal experts. If you're interested, please feel free to email us back. So I did what any paranormal geek would do. I emailed them back as soon as I could. The only thing that left me a bit uneasy was they were very aloof on the description of the said monster we were hunting. Granted, we were heading down to the Everglades, so it could only be one thing. It was the Wolfman of Heatstroke Swamp. Ha, right. Yeah, no, more likely we're looking at a reptilian-like gator man, or the swamp ape, aka Florida Bigfoot. Here we are 3 days later, and I hopped on the first plane I can get down to Florida. My first thoughts when I stepped off the plane were, oh my god, it is hot. It was spring, but it was in the low 90s with a heat index of over 100. Why would anyone want to live like this, especially a cryptid? Thoughts for later times. I grabbed myself an Uber and headed towards the destination of our meetup. When I arrived at our meetup destination, there were 3 other women and 2 men. After exchanging familiarities, we realized that the people who had invited us on this trek weren't even with us yet. After about another 10 minutes or so, a small bus pulled up. A couple that had to be in their mid-40s stepped off the bus. The couple introduced themselves as the Millers. They briefed us on what was expected of this trip, and lo and behold, I was right. The Millers told us of a camping site near the Everglades that had been recently closed earlier this year. The bodies of 3 young men were found strewn around the campsite miles from each other. The news ruled it out as a group of 4 had gone camping, and one of them had snapped and killed the other 3. Yet, if you read the autopsy report, the examination says they were all mauled by an animal, and then in parentheses it says a cougar. And if you interview the locals, they'll all tell you the same thing. It was the swamp ape. After getting a briefing from the Millers, our little band of misfits packed into the bus and we headed towards the camping site. I got this weird feeling in my stomach I couldn't shake as we pulled up to the gravel parking lot in the entrance of the campsite. There was one other vehicle in the parking lot. It was a Jeep, to be specific. The entrance to the camp was covered in yellow caution tape. A large burly man with a mustache stood next to the entrance with his arms crossed. His body language was projecting an unapproachable vibe. As our group gathered around him, he spoke up. I presume you are the Millers, and you brought yourself a group of lambs to a slaughter? The whole group gasped and was taken aback by his comment. Dr. Miller quickly took charge of the situation and explained to him that this was a group of colleagues who were all interested in the same thing, finding the truth about what happened here. The burly man rolled his eyes as he put his hand on the knot where all the tape had met in the middle, and within seconds the entrance to the camping site was now open. Our group filed into the entrance of the campsite one by one. As I passed the burly man, he rolled his eyes at me and said, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid." Oh, well, that's great. He thinks we're like a cult or something. Might as well add occult magic to the issues going on at this campground. Our group hoofed it for about 25 minutes towards the campsite, until at one point Dr. Miller dropped his backpack and said, "Aha! We have arrived." Excitedly, Dr. Miller claimed, "This is where we're going to make history." It looked like any ordinary campsite to me. We each started to unpack our bags and we helped set up base camp. At the heart of base camp was a tent full of electronic gizmos and gadgets. The Millers divided us up into pairs of 2 and had us go off to install trail cams. I got paired up with a young girl in about her early 20s with long brunette hair and big blue eyes named Elaine. Elaine and I headed west. It was our job to install a trail cam about a mile west. The other 3 groups would do the same in the other directions. We'd all head to the east and then half a tick up, installing another camera, giving us a full field of vision around us. After we got all our cameras installed, we all met back at the heart of base camp. By the time we all returned, it was getting close to twilight. I helped gather firewood in the meantime, waiting for nightfall to hit. Amongst my hunt, I found something. It had to be something that the police missed when combing the crime scene. It was the shred of a garment or a sleeping bag, and it was bloodstained. As I was lost in thought over this, I heard a scream in the distance. I snapped back to reality and hustled back to base camp. After we all arrived back and did a head count, we realized Elaine was not with the group anymore. Everyone fanned out to look for her except the Millers. Dr. Miller was more interested in watching his camera feed, and his wife claimed she should stay behind in case Elaine returns. The other 5 of us geared up for the investigation, and we fanned out to look for Elaine and possibly something else. We all kept trying to call her phone, but no one was picking up. Every 15 minutes or so, I'd walkie back to base to see if there was any sign of Elaine. It had been an hour or so, and by now it was pitch black out here. I thought I caught the scent of something in the air. Whatever it was, it smelled terrible, like rotting vomit. As I kept pushing on, I was dialing Elaine's cell phone for the umpteenth time when I heard something. It was like a buzzing noise, kind of like a phone on vibrate, and then I kicked something with my foot. Elaine's cell phone had been laying face down in the sand, and when I was dragging my feet, I happened to knock it face up. What's more concerning was what the cell phone was in. It was a humongous footprint. Was somebody fucking with me? Was this just like an elaborate prank? At this point, I was waiting for some asshole to jump out in a gorilla suit and start chasing me. I radioed back to base. The line was dead silent. Shit wasn't making sense, and I needed some goddamn answers. I was back to base in about 20 minutes. I couldn't believe what I fucking saw. The tent that had been receiving all the video feed was trashed. The whole place reeked, and there was somebody sitting on top of somebody by the fire. I shined my light on them and said, "Ha, very fucking funny, guys, you got me." The person sitting on top of the other person's chest looked like they were wearing a gorilla suit, until it turned around. I locked eyes with that fucking thing, and I about shit myself. I was going into panic. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I broke the eye contact with a blink, and that's when it let out a roar. My eyes widened. My heart skipped a beat. I went right into fight or flight mode, and let me tell you, bitch, I was flying. I started running in this strange zigzag pattern diagonally away from it. I was hoping I could confuse it, or shake it, or something. After 5 minutes of straight sprinting, I ducked behind a tree and clasped my hand over my mouth. I rubbed my temple with my free hand and tried to gather my thoughts. I could not grasp this. Like, what the fuck was that? It got Elaine and whoever else the fuck was still at camp. My mind raced on what to do as I held the stitch in my side. This didn't make any sense. I've researched Bigfoot in the past. They've never been hostile like this. Why would they even let us in here if they knew that was out here? I decided my best bet for survival was if I left right fucking now. I decided the next best move was probably to call 911 see if I can get some backup here. I pulled my phone out and wouldn't you know it, dead battery. Fuck, I exclaimed to myself. I killed my battery calling Elaine's phone so many damn times. I came up with a game plan. I needed to go to the police, but I couldn't without proof. They just treat me like the last guy whose friends died up here. I don't even know these fuckers. There's no way I'm going to jail for this shit. I had to do something. So then I made the dumbest decision I could think of on the spot. I'll go back for Elaine's phone. I'll get a picture of this thing, and I'll prove what I saw. So I started heading back the direction I had come. I was as quiet as I could be. I was practically tiptoeing. I ended up back at base camp before anything else. There was a bloodied corpse laying next to the fire. I carefully and stealthily snuck over to it. It was Mrs. Miller. As disgraceful as it was, I felt through her pockets looking for her cell phone. Ah, got it. It had been damaged during the attack. The screen was pure white. "Donkey fucker!" I exclaimed as I threw the phone. It landed next to the tent that Dr. Miller had originally been sitting in when I left the first time. The tent was in shreds, and there was blood everywhere. A pair of broken legs jutted out from underneath the shreds of the tent. I recognized those boots. They were Dr. Miller's. Damn it, that's 3. I retraced my steps to the best of my memory and headed towards that footprint that I had found earlier this evening. During this time, I heard another scream echo in the distance. Whatever this thing was, it was tearing through us like a bag of chips. After hearing that scream, I picked up my pace, but I also became very paranoid with every step I took. As I made pace in my hike, that pungent odor from before started to slap my nostrils. I stopped dead in my tracks. I hadn't even made it back to the place where I had found the phone when I happened upon not 1, but 2 of these things. They were fighting over a corpse. It was the sickest tug-of-war you could ever imagine. My brain was overloaded with fear. I slowly began to back away as I realized the fault of my air, thinking that I was going to get a picture of one of these things and survive. Too late. As I backed away, my foot snapped a twig. Both the creatures stopped abruptly and looked straight in my direction. A split second, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and chucked it as hard as I could to the left, and it made a rustle sound as it hit the bush. The skunk apes let out a simultaneous roar. I pressed my back to the closest tree and I slowly slid down. I decided at this point survival was more important than anything else, and I decided to wait for my opportunity to escape. I timed each movement with precise caution. I moved a few feet every 10 minutes or so. Eventually, I reached the entrance to the campgrounds. I found the outline of our bus sitting lonesome in the moonlight. Of course, I didn't have the keys, but I figured I'd just pry my way onto it, and then I'd at least spend the night there safe. I didn't get much sleep that night. I think I nodded off maybe once or twice as I sat there paranoid in the back of the bus. Eventually, the sun did come up. That was the longest night of my life. An hour or so went by, and a familiar vehicle pulled up. It was that mustachioed douche, the park ranger who let us in the day before. Never thought I'd be so relieved to see such an asshole. I got out of the bus and I called out to him. He was shocked to see me. He was heading towards the entrance to the campground, and I begged him not to go in there. He stopped, raised an eyebrow, and then proclaimed, "You seen it, didn't you?" I quietly nodded. "What about the others? Are you the only one left?" he asked me. I ran my hand over my head and just quietly shook my head no. "Well, I take it as you were sleeping in that bus, you don't have the keys, so get in the Jeep. I'll give you a ride back to town." Now, I just trusted this asshole, but I was willing to put more faith into him than the thing that tore apart my colleagues last night. I got in the passenger side of his Jeep. and we drove away. I was exhausted. I probably passed out within 10 minutes of us being in that Jeep. I awoke to the slam of a car door. I blinked a few times and scanned my surroundings. I had a quick start when I looked over and saw Mr. Mustache leaning against the window of my passenger door. I was confused more than anything because we were surrounded by wilderness and we were in front of the mouth of a cave. Seconds passed and then I realized what was happening. Me and Mr. Mustache locked eyes as a dastardly grin creeped across his face. He went to open the door, but I slammed the lock down with my fist. He flashed a gun and cocked his head at me. He motioned for me to get out of the Jeep. I obliged begrudgingly. I asked him in a loud voice, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He slowly pressed his hands to his lips and made a shh. Angry and confused, I asked him, "What the hell do you mean?" He replied in a southern hiss, "Well, boy, this is it. This is where they nest. You're at the entrance to the den of the skunk apes." My mind started to race. I was trying to find a way out of what he was about to do to me here. We shared a few seconds of silence and then he piped back up. "I can't let you leave after what you done did seen. And I can't keep having people survive and be arrested for murdering their friends. It's gonna start to look suspicious." I dropped to my knees in a sign of false defeat. Shakingly, I clenched 2 fists of dirt. He cleared his throat and then said, "Enough of that. Get back up. We're heading inside there." He pointed a gun at my head, took off the safety, and said, "Move." Now his back was to the cave, so I widened my eyes and I said in a shaky voice, "Look behind you." I turned around quickly and worried. I waited for him to turn back angrily. I stood up quickly and flung both handfuls of dirt into his face. Direct hit, I got him in the eyes, and then he screamed, "You asshole!" I swiftly kicked him in the balls after that. I grabbed his gun and I grabbed the Jeep keys. After checking to make sure the safety was still off, I put a bullet through his knee. Afterwards, I frantically jumped into the Jeep, I turned it on, and I hauled ass while leaving my hand on the horn. I saw it in my rear view. Multiple of those things came out of the mouth of the cave and surrounded him as he laid in pain, grasping his knee. I don't mess with the paranormal anymore. Don't go outside. I don't go near the woods. I feel like sometimes, if I close my eyes and sit in silence, I can still hear the powerful screech of the skunk ape.